All right, I'm back again. Here we go. We're going to talk about contingency tables. They're also known as two-way tables. Maybe two-way tables. And basically they let us know the relationship between two variables. We're looking for an association between two variables, or whether or not to see if they're independent of each other. And I'll get to what that means in a minute. First of all, let's just talk about some of the basic vocabulary and what this actually is. Now, these are categorical variables here, just remember. What I have here is the relationship. I'm looking at the relationship between gender and music preference. So what I did is I went out and I asked a bunch of males and a bunch of females to check what type of music is their favorite, either hip-hop, top 100, or country. So, you know, the guys came in and they each checked one, and the girls. So each of these numbers in here, are frequencies, they're counts of how many, like in here, there were 20 males that liked country the best. There were 30 males that liked top 100 music the best. And there were 10 males that preferred hip-hop. 10 females that preferred hip-hop. 20 females that liked top 100. And 10 females that liked country. Okay? So this tells us that, you know, this is the number of people that, these are counts. Now, a lot of times you see numbers in there and you think, oh, that must be quantitative. This is not a quantitative, these aren't quantitative variables. Quantitative variables are like, if everyone came through and I measured something on them that was like a number, like their height. Here, everybody that came through, I asked them about their preference, you know, they checked off categories. So these numbers are just the number of people who checked off these categories. So if I was going to display this data visually, I'd have to use the displays that we have for categorical data, which are either pie charts, a side-by-side bar, the segmented bar. That's an old favorite of mine. Maybe we'll get to that at the end of this. But let's first talk about a couple more bits of language that we use, some more words. First off, it's hard for me to see what's going on here because it's just frequencies, so I like to make things relative. And before I do that, whenever I see one of these things, what I like to do first is put the totals in. Okay? So that's what I'm going to do. 10-10, I get 20. 30-20, I get 50. 20-10, I get 30. 10-20, 30-40. 50, I get 60. Double check. 60 and 40 is 100. 20, 50, 70, 100. Good. So that's the total overall. Notice what I did is I put some totals out here in the margins. The margins. So we're going to talk about a couple distributions here, about distributions. One of them is called marginal distribution, and my hint is the margins. And the other one we're going to talk about is conditional distribution, and that's when I want to know a distribution, but I'm going to give you a condition first. So let's just start with the distribution in the margins. Let me just grab a piece of paper here so I can, put something out and show you something. Suppose somebody will ask you, what's the marginal distribution of music preference? Notice they didn't ask you anything about gender. They threw that word marginal in there so that you go, oh man, I forgot what that word meant. Just don't read that. What if they said, what's the distribution of music preference? They just wanted to know how music preference is distributed. Like, who liked what music the most? So when they throw margin in, they're just talking about one of the variables. So imagine none of this, you couldn't see any of this stuff. And someone asks you, hey, what's the distribution of music preference? Here's what you'd say. Oh, the distribution of music preference? Well, 20 students like hip-hop, 50 like top 100, and 30 liked country. And that's would be the marginal distribution in counts. But usually what they want when they say marginal distribution, they want the distribution out here in the margin. They're talking just about one variable. They want it relative. And when we have relative, we put it over the total. So I'm going to ignore all this stuff, and I'm actually going to give you the marginal distribution. 20 out of the 100 liked hip-hop, which is 20%. 50 out of the 100 liked top 100, which is 50%. And 30 out of the 100 liked country, which is 30%. So if someone asks, what's the marginal distribution of music preference, it's the same thing as saying, what's the distribution of music preference? That when you're talking marginal, you're only talking about just one of them. So you just ignore the one, nor gender. I didn't ask you anything about that. So here's the marginal distribution of music preference. Well, the marginal distribution preference is this. And make sure you say each category. You just don't say, 20%, 50%, 30%. You write full sentences in this course. So 20% prefer hip hop, 50% prefer top 100, and 30% prefer country. Okay? That's your marginal distribution. That's out in the margin. The other marginal distribution you can talk about is, what's the marginal distribution of gender? That's what I'm curious about. I'm curious about gender right now. So I'll talk about the marginal distribution. The same thing. Ignore all this information. I don't care about it. I'm just going to talk about how gender is distributed. Well, 60 out of 100 are male, 40 out of 100 are female. So the marginal distribution of gender is just 60% male, 40% female. That's the marginal distribution of gender. Now, that's cool. But then you get some vocabulary. One of them is, the word is conditional, which is, I'm going to ask you about a distribution, but I'm going to give you a condition. So I might ask you, what's the distribution of music preference for females? Now I'm putting a condition on it. See, before I say, what's the distribution of music preference? Well, that was just overall. The distribution of music preference. Now I say the distribution of music preference for females. So now I want to know, how are the females? How is music preference distributed amongst females? Like, what percent of the females like hip hop? This. So I just go in the female. I put a condition on. So now I'm inside the table. Marginal is always outside. So they ask you marginal distribution. It's this over this, this over this, this over this, or this over this, this over this. So it's the only two options for marginal. Conditional is a little bit trickier. So let's do conditional distribution. Listen to what I'm asking. What is the distribution of music preference for females? So I'm only focused now on females. Females. Well, 10 preferred hip hop, 20 preferred top 100, 10 preferred country. But I like to put that in relative terms, relative to all females. Because a lot of people look at this and say, oh, well, obviously males like, this more top 100 than females do. More males like top 100. But you have to put it in relative terms. You can't compare just the number, the counts. You need to turn them into percentages, and that's what we're going to do in a minute. But let's look at this again. 10 out of 40 of the females like hip hop, 20 out of 40 like top 100, and 10 out of 40 prefer country. So if I was going to tell you the conditional distribution of music preference for females, I'd say 10 out of 40, which is 1/4, 25% prefer hip hop, 25% of the females, 50%, 20 out of the 40, 50% of the females prefer top 100, and 25% prefer country. Now at first glance, okay, that's one of them. Now at first glance, people who do say this, oh, well, guys like, top 100 more than girls do. If you look into the numbers, notice 20 out of the 40 females, half of the females said, I like top 100. 30 out of the 60 males, half of the males. So 50% of the females like top 100, 50% of the males like top 100. So don't just dive into the table and just look at the numbers only. Put them into percents. So let's do the other percent. Ready? Let's look at the other condition, the other column condition. What's the distribution of music preference for males? So now I'm only worried about males. So here we go. I'm in male column. 10 out of 60, 1/6 like hip hop, 30 out of 60, 50% like top 100, and 20 out of 60 prefer country. And you turn those right into percentages with this. I can just put it straight in. Ooh, 1/6 is approximately what? I know 1/3 is about 33%. So what do you think 1/6 is? Let me clear this. 1 divided by 6 is probably half that. 16%. So I just put it in like that. This over this, this over this, this over this. That gives me the conditional. So I get 16%, 32%, and 50%. Okay? Actually 34%. Whatever. Okay? Got 20. Whatever. You get it. Okay, so that's how you find the conditional. The other conditionals could be the rows. What is the conditional distribution of gender for hip-hop lovers? Well, now I'm talking about hip-hop lovers. So when I say that for, the conditional distribution for hip-hop lovers. I'm only concerned about hip-hop lovers. 10 out of 20, 10 out of 20, like 10 out of 20 are male, 10 out of 20 are female. So it's 50-50. Of the hip-hop lovers, half are male, half are female. Interesting. What about the distribution of gender for country? Oh, 20 out of 30 are male, 10 out of 30 are female. I'm only worried about country, for country. So you can see 20 out of 30, 2/3, 66% of the country lovers are male, only 33% are female of all the country lovers. That doesn't mean that men like country more than women. You have to always look at the overall counts. So here are some questions you need to think of. And this is for like English language learners. You're going to have more difficulty with this. Even native speakers have difficulty with this. So if you're struggling, just take your time. You'll get through it. Just keep practicing, okay? 2 different questions. What percent of the males prefer hip-hop? What percent of the males? So, of all of the males, what percent prefer hip-hop? What percent of the males What percent of the males? Just of the males, what percent prefer hip-hop? 10 out of the 60. 10 out of the 60 prefer hip-hop. We found out that's about 17%. 17% of the males. A different question is, what percent of the hip-hop lovers were male? Different question. What percent of hip-hop were male? That's different. We're saying of hip-hop, of all those who like hip-hop. Now we're talking this way. What percent of them were male? 10 out of 20. Let me fix this. Male. 10 out of 20. Those 2 questions are confusing. What percent of the hip-hop lovers were male? And what percent of the males were hip-hop lovers? 2 different questions, totally different. So be careful and read it very carefully, okay? So again, things to remember. Marginal distributions are the distributions of the margins. There's only 2 possible things you'll do. This over this, this over this, this over this, that margin, or this one, this over this, this over this. Marginal distributions, the denominator of the fraction is always the total. Conditional, you're going to use inside. These over this, this over this, this over this, this over this, this over this. So the denominator of a conditional is always going to be one of these. Okay? And you're going to go either down a row or a column, column, column inside. Those are the conditionals, okay? Because you put a condition. You only want to know about one particular row or one particular column, not all of just one of the variables, okay? And that's that. In the next video, I'm going to talk about how to tell whether 2 variables are independent by looking at the contingency table. Or if they're not independent, there's probably an association. So those are new words. All right, see you later.